Hey everybody, welcome back to the Donna Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. Welcome back. Just remember, this is a live stream, so everybody that's out there, jump in the chat, tell us where you're from, ask your questions. We have another amazing guest today as we round out an incredible month dedicated to emerging industry leaders. Our sponsor this month was the Sonoran Desert Institute, a School of Unmanned Technology, and we kicked off the month with John Miner, the school's dean. He did an incredible job, and then we had this company from Canada called Arium Analytics and Jordan Sikoria, the CEO, with their incredible Robird. I'm doing this because this thing is an ornithopter and it looks like a peregrine falcon. Again, if you missed any of these, go back to Drone Life YouTube and subscribe to their channel because all of these things are available on demand. We then had Asaf Mansa, the CTO of Defend Solutions, talking about their incredible cyber-based counter drone technology. And last week we were live at the Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition Summit with Director and Manager Sean Gare of the EDRC. So Julie is rounding out an incredible month. And frankly, we'll talk about ending with a bang. Okay, so first of all, this is true. I've been a super fan of Julie Garland for a long time. I've been following her on LinkedIn and all these other channels. Julie is an Air Awards winner from their very first season last year in the training category, People's Choice. And her accolades go on and on and on. But without further ado, I want to introduce to you Julie Garland.
Hi, Dawn. It's such a pleasure to be here and just delighted for being on again and just really enjoyed our chat last week on Clubhouse and really looking forward to today as well.
And, Julie is appearing as a Volatus Aerospace Above and Beyond series guest. So once again, thank you to Volatus for philanthropically endowing so many amazing people like Julie to be on this show. So we appreciate you, Volatus. And Julie, we spent so much time last week on Clubhouse in our Drone Law Connections room talking about your background. And so I know Mike is going to drop that link for replay in the chat. I don't want to retread all that ground, but if we could get more like the 30-second elevator speech of your, I know that's going to be hard to do because I think we spent about 15 or 20 minutes on this in Clubhouse, but maybe that kind of 30-second elevator speech because there's so much we need to cover in this show.
Sure. So I started off my career as an aircraft maintenance engineer, but I'd always wanted to be a pilot. That was my life's ambition since I was a kid at 8 years old. My grandfather had me in Flight Simulator, and so I'd always wanted to be a pilot. But when I came to 18, there was nobody recruiting pilots. At that time, there was nobody doing the ab initio pilot training within an airline. So I became an aircraft maintenance engineer. I did my apprenticeship with Aer Lingus, and then I went on. Eventually, I built up enough to go and self-sponsor my flying career, and then I went flying. I did my flying initially. I went down to South Africa, down to Johannesburg, to Grand Central Airport, and then came back to Ireland and was out in Weston Airport. Became a flight instructor, first officer with Air Aran, captain with Air Aran, training captain, flight safety officer. Then went to CityJet as a direct entry captain, and then from there, I decided that I wasn't going to retire from the left-hand seat of an airplane. So I went on to study law. I became a barrister. I got called to the bar in 2010. I spent 5 years in the law library practicing law. Then I went into Norwegian as the director of compliance. And at that point in time, I'd also, just before that, I'd set up the Unmanned Aircraft Association in Ireland, and I got involved with drones. So my involvement with drones goes back to 2014, 2015. And I think we'll probably talk about all of that a little bit more as we go on, but that's really what brought me today. So I suppose it's the interaction of the technical background coupled with the flight operations experience, and then bring to that all the legal stuff where we're wallowing in a legal quagmire at the moment. So I think the background brings me to this point of my journey. To have all of those accolades together in one place really gives this industry, what you can do in this industry, incredibly. I hope that didn't go on too much.
No, well, look, that's what I said, Julie. Your experience, your expertise, it's really mind blowing. And she talks fast, and she has an amazing accent that I love to listen to. So just to highlight, like, I'm talking crewed aircraft pilot, right? A safety, a maintenance officer, safety officer, and, you know, a licensed attorney or a barrister in Ireland. And, you know, now the CEO of two companies. We're going to talk about AvTrain primarily today, but we're going to hit on Vertex as well. And Julie, by the way, there's people in the chat already giving you love. Marcinda Kazan is out there with a big heart, and then James Standen has the Before You Go handle. He's asking if there's a way to reach you because he's headed over to the pond in August. So, you know, James, Julie is on LinkedIn, and we'll have her website up again at the end of the show. So I'll also connect with you offline. But, you know, James is kind of one of our super fans, Julie. He's always here, and we really appreciate him. So let's talk about AvTrain first, because you stood this up, if memory serves. I'm looking at my notes, but it was 2019, I believe. And, you know, with all of your wealth of experience and knowledge in a pilot seat and transitioning over to uncrewed, obviously training was something that was super important. You know, I guess that really informed your perspective, knowing that these aircraft are going to be sharing the same airspace as the commercial, you know, commercial planes you used to fly filled with passengers. So tell us a little bit about your inspiration to create AvTrain and really what it's all about.
Yeah, sure, John. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head exactly. I mean, it was the thoughts of, I was flying still. I was, you know, you're looking at this, suddenly there's a, you know, 2014, 2015 in Ireland, there was a proliferation of drones. The Aviation Authority here had, I'd been talking to them about how do we regulate, but not so much, not regulate to prevent, but regulate to encourage the industry and to allow people to fly drones, you know, rather than, and in fairness to the Aviation Authority here, they've always been hugely proactive in this area and really look towards it. So the Director, Safety Regulation in the Irish Aviation Authority, we had a lot of discussions with him. We set up the Unmanned Aircraft Association to try and bring operators under one umbrella. And we put together a statutory instrument, and we lived by that statutory instrument for the last 6 years until we got our European drone regulations. But what happened in that interim period was I was training drone pilots and operators since 2015 as an Irish Aviation Authority examiner, but it was for the grant of a national license. It wasn't for the grant of a European license. It was a license that you got in Ireland and you could operate in Ireland, but there's no recognition of licenses across different member states of Europe or even further afield. So it was only really when it came to 2019 and the European regulations were coming into force, and they were due to come in on the 1st of July 2020. But as we know, COVID delayed them by
Yes.
6 months. So, but having said that, I decided in 2019 that it was time to really, you know, make very positive decisions around this being my future career. And that was that if I was going to do it, I needed to do it full time, and I needed to set myself up. I had a company, small company on the side, but I was doing it part time, more so as a hobby up until then. So it was time to actually bite the bullet and do it full time, dedicate the time to it. So we set up AvTrain back in October 2019. We incorporated, and we were actually supported by an organisation here in Ireland called Enterprise Ireland, who fund startup companies and assist startup companies. But what they give in support goes so far and beyond the financial input that they make at the time. I mean, it's just incredible. We were down at Dubai Air Show with them last year, which is where we announced Vertex Aero. We've got the Farnborough Air Show now coming up next 2 weeks' time, and we'll be making more announcements there at Farnborough Air Show. But we're at an Enterprise Ireland stand, so it's all aviation companies coming together and really being supported by Enterprise Ireland. So we're what's called a recognised entity under the EASA regulations. So EASA, the European Aviation Safety Agency, it sings the FAA. And we're a recognised entity, which means we can carry out the training and certification for drone pilots and operators throughout all of the different levels and layers of certification that they require. So that goes from a hobby pilot right the way through to large operators operating in multiple jurisdictions up to a high level. We can do a verification of compliance up to a high level of robustness. Is the top end of our certification, which means that we can look at much larger airplanes operating in, you know, complex environments and complex airspace. And we do all of the verification for the authority to give them their authorizations. So we've got a pretty hefty range of of approvals from the Aviation Authority here, and they, as I say, it's for the grant of EASA for European licenses. So you know, our business went from being a small local, you know, kind of hedge school, if you like, to this, you know, what we can now, it's not just a European company, but it's actually becoming a global company, because the standards that are being set by EASA are being recognized globally, which is, you know, it's huge credit. Also very much credit to our own Aviation Authority here on the way they haven't just implemented them, but also really very much enforcing the regulations here as well, but also being very proactive in the development of the new regulatory environments, things like U-Space, low airspace management. We have, you know, eVTOL aircraft coming online. We've got certification standards for those.
Yes.
Special conditions for those. So we've got all of this. So AVTRAIN, I suppose, it sits in the middle, and then on one side we have Future Mobility Campus Ireland, and on the other side we have Vertex Aero, and we're partners with in both of those. So, you know, we've come a long way since 2019, but it's been a long road to get to 2019 as well.
Well, you know, there's so much to peel back in what you just said, but I don't want to kind of bypass the point that you were pivotal in creating Ireland's drone regulations before EASA had even published the European ones. And so, you know, that, you know, just to foot stomp that for everybody out there to appreciate, you know, the experience and what Julie has been doing, you know, leading, I mean, at the tip of the spear in Ireland, obviously working with EASA and now, of course, beyond. So I want to talk about the training in particular, because, you know, without getting into all the different certifications and levels in EASA, and by the way, everybody, if you're not familiar with EASA's regulations, there's some great articles out there. I'm sure, Julie, you have some things on your website as well. And I've authored a number of things for Drone Life. My website is somewhat rebranding, and not all of my content is on there right now. But I will get that up here in the next week. And, you know, just so interesting. I've been watching what Europe has been doing. And I feel like they are light years ahead in many respects of what we're doing here in the US. And I'm just being frank, because, you know, the U-Space regulation, like a real regulation on UTM, we've got a ConOps 2.0. I mean, and you're actually doing it. And so you mentioned, and I'm going to get into U-Space a little bit, and some big announcement that AVTRAIN has just came out this morning. You're going to hear it here first, so stick around. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the Future Mobility Campus Ireland and what you've been doing with them, because you've moved. Actually, you know what, Julie, let's break. Let's talk about the training you're doing first, okay? And, you know, maybe how it may be different from what your knowledge is of what's happening in the US. And then I want to talk about Future Mobility Campus Ireland and some of your real world operations where you're putting this training to the test every single day. So let's talk first about the training, because there's been a lot of buzz about training, at least, you know, in the larger aircraft arena in the United States, like what are the rules going to be? And you're already doing it. You've been doing it with small drones, and you're thinking already ahead with Vertex on the next wave of advanced air mobility. So walk us a little bit through your training system and how people can tap into that.
Sure. So I suppose the biggest difference between EASA regulations and the FAA regulations is that the FAA regulations are based on commercialization. If you're commercializing your product at all, you must hold a license, whereas the EASA regulations are entirely based on risk. The risk your operation is to uninvolved people, whether they're on the ground or in the air. So what that means is then we have varying standards and categories of licenses depending on the risk involved. So right. Very low risk, due to the size of your drone or the operating environment where you're flying it, you need lesser training, less certification. As you get up into the higher risk, you want to fly M300s over people's heads, you know, you must have a much higher level of certification and also redundancies, things like parachutes and impact reduction built in. But it all comes back to the theoretical knowledge and the practical training. On the theoretical side, we're putting our course, the basic course that we do is online. So you can log in fully online and you can actually get your European license from the US. So you can do that, and you
Oh,
can have it. So
wow.
if you want to come to, if you're coming to Ireland, if you're coming on holidays. So I know James is online there. If he wants to fly his drone in August, he can go into the website. And the website actually is avtrain.aero, but we actually have a free course there, just which talks through all of the different categories of license. So you can just sign up for that and just have a look at that. And it gives a really good overview on the difference in between the different licenses that we offer. So, but you can do your Open A2, which is kind of the hobby pilot. You can still fly if it's a reasonably small drone, which normally if you're traveling, you're taking the smaller parts of your, smaller drones with you rather than your M300 to just buzz off around on your holidays. So it allows you to fly in a reasonable amount of areas and fly reasonably small drones. So you can do that completely online, and you self-certify your practical experience. So there's no practical, you don't have to meet an examiner. You carry out the theoretical knowledge online. You register on the Irish Aviation Authority's website. It's called MySRS. You register as an operator, and then you do a short course with them, and you do a short exam with them, and then you come to our website and you do the next level up of training. And then you just send us on your details. We endorse that training, say you've carried it out and you completed it and you completed the exam. And you get to listen to me for about 4 or 5 hours. And hopefully I do speak a little bit more slowly during the videos. We haven't had any complaints yet. And that's kind of the lower level. And then the next stage up, then what we do is we do it through live webinars. So when you finish that basic license, you then select a live webinar date that you want to come online and do the live webinar. And what we look at there is risk management in higher categories of risk. So we have things like the SORA risk assessment, the specific operations risk assessment. We have predefined risk assessments that are kind of off-the-shelf risk assessments that you can take for various different scenarios, like flying a drone up to 25 kilos in a congested area in controlled or uncontrolled airspace. So we've all of these different scenarios, and we train you through each of those, how to apply for them. And then following that, what we do is we get details from the pilots, and we get what drones they want to operate, what parachute they're going to put on them, what flight termination system they're going to put on them if they want to operate, anything basically over 1 kilogram in a congested area. And they need to have this equipment. We don't have it built in on drones yet, so they need to identify what equipment they're going to put on the drone. And then we issue an operations manual. So they actually get a full operations manual with all their processes and procedure, their emergency procedures, and they get time to study that. And they also get a little bit of homework as well, writing a SORA risk assessment. And then they come back to do a practical assessment. So there's another day then involved. So you must, if you want to have a specific category operational authorization, you have to actually demonstrate that you're competent and capable of carrying out the standard operating procedures that are in your operations manual. So you come back, you do a practical test with me, and hopefully going to have one other examiner on board. Now we have 2 guys who do it for me part-time as well, and hopefully going to have one more full-time examiner on board, flight examiner on board as well.
So Julie, a practical exam, it's literally in person, and they're flying the drone and you're watching them and you're judging whether they are competent in those procedures in that operating manual. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, and it's mainly distances and setting up ground risk buffers and setting up contingency areas and contingency volumes. So it's looking at the area where they're operating, looking at having no uninvolved persons within that area, and then building in various buffers around that based on the conditions on the day, the position keeping capabilities of the aircraft. But particularly say the Met on the day, is a very blustery day. Their own, and then any latencies involved between them and the drone, either their own reaction times, and then also the latency between making an input on the controller to the drone, picking it up and reacting appropriately.
Wow. So you mentioned your company and your training is global. James did ask this question, which is a great one. Once they get these certifications from you, is it also transferable to the UK or anywhere in Europe? I know the UK is maybe even a little separate. I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. I was just
they're outside, right?
Before Brexit, it would have been.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking as I asked the question, I'm like, wait a minute, there was a little bit of a break there.
Yeah. So the training is valid in all of Europe, and it's also valid then in all of the EASA member states. There's about 4 or 5 other states outside of Europe that are members of EASA. So places like Norway, Switzerland. So they're outside of the EU, but they're members of EASA. So it's the training and certification that we do is valid in every European member state, everywhere except the UK. So, because the UK
Ah,
is no longer part of Europe, so you don't get to use, but they have an identical system in the UK. The drone regulations actually came into force the day before Brexit, so they had actually planned to implement the EU regulations. So they put them in place. Now they are starting to diverge somewhat as you get into the higher categories of risk, but for the lower level of license. So basically, if you want to fly in the UK, very similar system to what you would have to do in Ireland. You have to go into the UK CAA website, you register as an operator, you get what's called a flyer ID, and then you do your A1, A3 exam on the UK's website. And if you want to get the higher certification, you have to go through that process with what's called an RAE, a recognised assessment entity. But just on that, it's actually a really good question, because at Farnborough we'll be announcing much more publicly. We've already put in the application now, so it's not a secret, but we'll be making a little bit more because we will be in the UK. We're actually applying as a recognised assessment entity in the UK. So that means that when we do the training, when you do your training and qualification with AvTrain, you will be able to select whether you want it to be just a European license or whether you want it to be a European license and a UK license. So it's going to take us probably about 6 months so before that's in place. So so if James is coming over, I would suggest that he's, he'll need, if he wants to fly in the UK, if he is going to the UK as well, he will need to go through that process in Ireland and in the UK.
so you continue to expand, and this is a great overview of the training and the differences, because I love the practical aspect, honestly. I have a drone, and I've only recreationally flown like twice, honestly, because none of my kids will go out with me and take me. And I don't personally feel like, I took the trust test, I'm sure you're familiar with that, Julie. I mean, it took me 5 minutes or 10 minutes to take it, but it doesn't teach me actually how to fly my drone. And being in this space, and of course being a lawyer like you, Julie, I don't feel comfortable. Like I was supposed to go get my Part 107 and take a week-long course in August, and now I've been signed up for months. And now, of course, my youngest son has moved in for college is that week, so I'm kicking the can to the right again. But I think that hands-on training, that hands-on demonstration that you're competent is really key. And I also love the fact that there's no distinction between recreational and commercial. It's all about risk, because you know what, if you're flying something recreational and it's 25 pounds or greater, and it drops on somebody's head, they're not going to care if you were flying it recreationally or commercially.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so anyway, huge fan. I'll leave it at that. Let's pivot a little bit and talk about the real world things you're doing. Some of it was R&D and demos, but you've dived in deep with this Future Mobility Campus Ireland, and partnered with some incredible companies to do real world, beyond visual line of sight operations. So tell us a little bit about, and that was really towards the end of last year, if I recall correctly. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in that space.
Yeah, so I suppose just to touch on one other thing, just on the training, just before we go off it, the other thing that we're looking at, and we're really doing a lot of research in the market at the moment, is looking from the practical point of view of actually having a flight simulator, and having a really good flight simulator, and partnering, say, with the likes of DJI or Autel or somebody like that, and actually having a proper simulator for drone operators to actually be able to hook up and actually to be able to do the flight test remotely as well, ultimately. So that's what we would hope to do, is be able to do that. I'll be able to sit at my office desk and actually carry out a flight test with somebody in Germany or France or Spain or something, and they just hook in through an online program that we're going to have.
So
beyond
Julie,
AI is going to be
you
incredible.
you need to talk to John Miner from the Sonoran Desert Institute, and he was the sponsor of this month, because they have a flight sim. He and a number of his teammates that are leading that school of unmanned technology were former United States Air Force, either scientists or drone pilots. In fact, Lieutenant Colonel Fred Bevetto, retired, is their lead test engineer, and he actually created the training for the United States Air Force for RPAS pilots, for RPA pilots, and they have a simulator. Their course is remote, and they absolutely have a simulator. So after this, I'm linking the two of you up, and you can have a great conversation. And certainly there's other folks out there, but it might be a good conversation at least.
Yeah,
So let's
fantastic.
talk about Future Mobility Campus Ireland. What is it, and what have you been doing with it?
Yeah, so FMCI, Future Mobility Campus Ireland, was set up. It's two guys. It's Russ and Wasim, and they used to work for Jaguar Land Rover, the car company. And Jaguar Land Rover set up a huge software base to develop software for autonomous cars at Shannon Airport, right on in the Shannon Business Park. And various other companies have been attracted because of that. That started off, if you like, the kind of ecosystem down there for it becoming a centre of excellence for autonomy. And Russ and Wasim had the idea that they needed to set it up as a centre of excellence. It wasn't just JLR. It needed to be other companies bringing in, sensor companies bringing in, data management companies, all of the stuff that goes with autonomy, all of that whole ecosystem that needs to be in place, and bringing those companies in. So they decided eventually, with the support of JLR, to leave and set up this company. And they got a lot of government funding here to set up the test bed. And they set it up, and what it is also, one of the other partners in FMCI is Shannon Group, and Shannon Group and Shannon Commercial Properties is one of the partners within that. They own the road network in this business park, so it's actually a privately owned public road. So they have access, so they could put in things like dark fiber network. They could put in the, fancy traffic lights that, deal with autonomous cars, that autonomous cars can recognize and read and all this. So they put in all of this, and they put in a test bed which has, it's completely flat, and it has, incredibly flat. It has to be microflat because it's used for the calibration of the sensors that go onto the cars. And then they also have a parking lot there, which has every single possible scenario that a car could be asked to park in. They're available with other cars, so they can have the cars kind of buzzing around on it. And they just have the coolest toys ever, really, really the coolest toys.
Sounds like it. Well, how are drones integrated into that? Because Julie, you and I both know the future of mobility is going to be networked, it's going to be integrated, it's going to be multi-domain. So how do drones play here, and how did you get involved?
Yeah, so I met Russ and Wasim, I think it was probably 2017, 2018, and we started talking about the layering FMCI Air on top of FMCI. So, and putting the Airpiece in, and that has really, it's last year, like, we got planning permission to build our drone port there. We got change of use. We had it was originally kind of a car park, and we have a drone port there now. So which will become a vertiport ultimately, but we'll probably put a vertiport in another location, actually closer to the terminal building for kind of the advanced air mobility and eVTOL aircraft. But this will stay as a drone port. So we have our drone port there, and that's very much connected in with the future mobility, with the technology, and with all of the different companies that are there. And then actually next week, the 15th of July, they have their official opening of the FMCI site. So it's actually the test bed, but and they have various different, it's fantastic. They have a fabulous video, which I'll get a link to, and I can send it on to you as well, for what we have down in Shannon. So they have their own building, which has all of these bays in it. So like Tesla will be taking a bay, or some Jaguar Land Rover will have a bay, or whoever. The drone will be a large drone bay in it as well. And they've got various drones that they operate there. And then they also have, as I say, the test area, they have the road network, the dark fiber network, and then we have our drone port as well. And the drone port, we've actually just submitted an operations manual to operate it as an airport, just to make sure that,
oh my gosh, you are light years ahead. We were just on our other podcast, Julie, this week, or was it our Twitter Spaces Full Crew, and oh no, it was Full Crew Monday. It was the podcast where we were talking about the FAA just had a listening section for their Beyond Visual Line of Sight Advisory Rulemaking Committee last week, which, by the way, nobody even knew about. So surprise, they did, everybody. And my buddy Rex Alexander, who I think Julie, right? He's an expert in vertiports. And, one of his comments was, we don't even have a definition of what a drone port is. And what's the plan to document their locations, right? Because everybody needs to know where these landing and takeoff sites are. And so man, I will definitely want to see your drone port and explore that, but we actually only have 15 minutes left, and I can't believe it. I knew time was going to fly with you, Julie, because we have so much to talk about. So I want to cut to the chase and talk about the BVLOS, Beyond Visual Line of Sight, operations you performed with some big company. They're right there at that campus. And then I want to pivot and talk about your big announcement that just came out this morning.
Yeah, so last we had gone through one of the qualifications that you can achieve. The highest level of qualification that you can achieve at the moment in Europe is called an LUC, which is a Light Unmanned Aircraft Systems Operator Certificate. And what that means is that you can self-certify your own operations. When you develop, you have a methodology, you have a safety management system and a compliance monitoring system, the same as you would have in an airline. So you monitor your own activities internally, and it allows you to self-authorize your operations. So you don't have to submit your risk assessment. Your process is approved rather than having to submit your risk assessment to the aviation authorities in the various member states. So it's a European-wide broad stroke that you can self-authorize your own operations.
Okay.
So we went through that. Avtrain went through that process with Skyports, who are a UK company, set up a company here in Ireland in order to go through that. Skyports have two sides to their business. One is on the vertiport side and the other one is on being an operator as well. So they've done quite a lot of beyond visual line of sight operations, but never under an LUC. So we went through their LUC approval process with them here in Ireland. And then we set up, as part of that LUC approval process, we set up a proof of concept flights, which was out of the Future Mobility Campus Ireland. So FMCI was one of the partners. Shannon Group, Shannon Airport were very heavily involved because it's right in controlled airspace. This is the FMCI drone port is at the perimeter fence of Shannon Airport. So you've got a major international airport with Class C airspace, and we're just, it's just incredible that we actually that we have all of this, these facilities available to us, but the full cooperation of air traffic control as well. And then the other partner was Skyports. As I said, we were operating the Swoop Kookaburra drones, and which were being operated by Skyports. So we had FMCI.
So you said it was Swoop Arrows drones.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a Kookaburra drone, and they're actually going to replace the Kookaburra drone now with a kite drone soon. So we did this. We were operating, though. What we needed then was somebody to operate for. So we approached FedEx, and we ended up doing the proof of concept for FedEx, and so that was huge in itself. And I mean, it should have been what we thought was major global international, major global news, because here we were operating or demonstrating the integration of drones into supply chain logistics for a major carrier like FedEx.
Yeah, in controlled airspace, like no one's that was so significant. We had talked about, let's just leave it, the publication that will remain unnamed, that has a global reach that I pitched, and they were like, they didn't quite get it. And it's just like, wow. Because I knew this was big when you were telling me about it back in October. And so how many flights did you all successfully do? And what was the end result of that?
Yeah, so we operated for a month, and we were flying up to 30 flights per day, and we were generally getting 5 days out of 7 per week. Some of the days, we did it in October. Now the weather in the west coast of Ireland in October generally can be pretty inclement, but it's mainly wind and rain, and the drone is very capable. The Swoop Kookaburra drone is very capable, particularly with wind. We set our own limitations around it as well. We didn't want to push any limits or boundaries, or so we were quite conservative in what we did, but still we managed to get flying for 20 out of the 30 days, or 22 out of the 30 days. I think we got to fly, and
that's impressive, actually.
Yeah, and we got to operate up to 30 flights per day. And as you said, the critical point in that was that it was integrated operations. It was not segregated airspace. We had a NOTAM saying that there was a drone flying. That was it. There was no segregated airspace, and we did have a standard routing, but we also did, to demonstrate the proof of concept, we actually did 2 other flights. So we were going from the Future Mobility base across to Foynes Port. So it was linking critical infrastructure as well. It was linking an airport and a port. That journey would normally take you 45 to 50 minutes by car. It was taking us between 7 and 8 minutes by drone.
Wow.
So it just, it's all around history. Yeah. And we had another flight we did up to Ennis, which is a town which is north of the airport. So we had to transverse the airport and go, and we went, one way we went over the airport, and the other way we came back under the approach path. And the other one we did into Limerick City, and the Limerick City routing that we did from our base in FMCI. When we went to go into Limerick City, we wanted to actually do it from uncontrolled into controlled airspace, and actually look at that transition and how that transition would take place. So that was one of the last few flights that we did, was actually operating. We actually operated from an airfield that's in uncontrolled airspace into Limerick, into the city, in order, beyond visual line of sight, but in order to demonstrate that we could do it. Now it's just at the outskirts. It was to a Docklands just at the outskirts of the city, but it was still, demonstrating getting close to, the city environment, but actually the transition from uncontrolled into controlled airspace, and again from controlled airspace into uncontrolled airspace. So it's really incredible what we achieved during that time.
Yeah. So did you all put together like a white paper or something outlining your findings, or is that more proprietary? Because honestly, I feel like the world could really learn from what you did and what you achieved, and it's just so significant.
Yeah, it is proprietary at the moment still, and we're actually pushing that we need to publish something on it because it was so significant. But the other reason that we want to publish what we did and in a much more comprehensive way than we have is that it is really important. We're done with proof of concept. We have proven the concept. These concepts work. We can do it.
Right,
We've proven the
right.
concept. We need to do it now. It's now proof of market and moving really on to the next stage of having these as foundation stones for us to build on. And really that leads us into the announcement somewhat.
It is. It was perfect segue, honestly, because as you were talking, I'm thinking, well, UAS traffic management is a significant piece of what you basically exercised, and so big announcement today. Drum roll. What is it?
Okay, so we have been awarded CESAR funding, which is the Single European Skies Advanced Research Projects. CESAR 3 is the latest one, and today the Transport Commissioner for Europe announced today that we had received some funding. We had applied, the project value is around 7 million euros. And we had applied for funding back in, the beginning of January. We worked all over like October, November, December. While we were doing all this beyond visual line of sight, while we're doing all of that stuff, we were also working on getting this project together. So it's been a long road to this announcement today. So it's just incredible. So we've been funded, and what we're looking at doing is it's developing a digital sky demonstrator. And the partners in it, and it's really important, I think, the partners are in it because the success of a project depends on the partners.
Yes.
And like the partners in this are obviously Future Mobility Campus Ireland, ourselves, Shannon Airport, the Irish Aviation Authority are involved. I suppose one of the much bigger partners that we have, which has that global reach, is Collins Aerospace, which you'll be aware of, Collins Aerospace, Raytheon as well, Collins Aerospace. So, and they have a significant base here. And then we also have Deep Blue, who are an Italian company, and then Mana, who are Mana from Heaven. They're a drone delivery company here in Ireland as well that have been doing a lot of extended line of sight flights. So it is so exciting. We've had huge support for the project, and the partners that we have in it, as I say, the success of it depends on the partners, and the partners we have are incredible. But also we've got a lot of interest, even with people knowing what we were planning on doing, on other partners getting involved in it. And basically what we've set up is we have this, Collins have a Skylar radar, which is a ground-based radar system. And we're looking at using that in order to integrate unmanned aircraft into particularly controlled airspace, but also in uncontrolled airspace, being able to manage, drones at large events, things like that, or in small cities or small towns that actually want to have a ground-based radar to be able to pick up when drones are operating, where they should be operating, when they shouldn't be operating, are they, should they be prevented from operating. So it's incredible. We've set out, I think it's 5 use cases within it that we will develop on, and pretty much use case 1 was to beyond visual line of sight in controlled airspace. So we're really now bringing that proof of concept that we did into this project as well. So that's why I say when, with regards to what we have already done, it's about making sure that we're really documenting it properly as well as we move forward and looking to proof of market rather than just proof of concept. So yeah, it's incredible. And that was announced just today. So we'd actually been told the day I was doing the Clubhouse last week, we'd been just told just before I came on air that we were being awarded it, but we were under an embargo until today, until the Transport Commissioner announced it today. So just so excited about it. And yeah, we just kick off now. We just have to sign contracts and off we go. And we're
literally off you go. And so congratulations. I mean, this is absolutely stunning news. And so when will like the first flights affiliated with this new project take off? Literally,
probably we're reckoning that the contracts, everything will be in place by September, because August tends to be a difficult month in Europe generally to get anything done. So we're figuring that it'll probably be September before all the contracts and everything is actually done, signed, sealed, delivered, and the money's delivered to us. So we would reckon that October, but we'll be putting plans in place from now on to have those flights starting to commence from October time. And we're really looking at the use cases that we have is building on each use case gets slightly more complex. So we start off actually in controlled airspace because we find it easier to operate in controlled airspace because you are operating in that controlled environment, and then moving into uncontrolled and the transition from controlled to uncontrolled, beyond visual line of sight, going a little bit further, kind of going to offshore to remote islands, and then looking at, going further afield. And then we're looking at cross-border operations as well, possibly from the East Coast across to maybe Wales or the UK, and also from maybe the north of Ireland, from Derry or Donegal somewhere, and going across the border into Northern Ireland as well. So
how far, how far, I know you use the metric system kilometers, how far out are some of these flights going to be?
Yeah, so we would hope to get up to around, we certainly hope to get up to around 70 kilometers. So what would be, 50 miles is 80 kilometers.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're
Wow.
looking at 45 miles, yeah, to do,
Yeah,
and
I saw
small
like
drones.
there's so much about this I want to pick your brain on. Like, okay, so what software are you using to orchestrate this? And tell us more about the drone port. I mean, this could be like a series of like 10 webinars, honestly, everything you're doing. And maybe someday we'll do that together. But
Yeah.
in the meantime, we only have a couple minutes left, and I don't want to end the show, Julie, without talking at least for a little bit about Vertex and this, this new company you've just created with a couple of partners. Oh, and before we do have a great question. Ron Joseph in the audience is asking, what type of liability protections are you using? I guess maybe he's
So
thinking insurance.
yeah, so I mean, the drone operators that we're using are insured. Future Mobility Campus Ireland is insured, and so what we have is we've insurance on the drone port, if you like, but also then any operator that's there must carry their own insurance for whatever operations they're carrying out and doing. So they're obliged to have their own insurance. So that covers any third party liability, so on. I'm not sure if Ron, if that answers your question, but basically the operators have to have insurance themselves to operate where we are. For Beyond
And
Visual Line,
that's an EASA requirement. Is that correct,
yeah,
Julie?
yeah,
So
it is.
unlike in the United
Yeah.
States where there's no specific insurance requirement, the European regulation does require that, which I think is actually smart because in the US you can't drive a regular car, without having insurance. You're not supposed to anyway. So
Yeah.
it just makes a lot of sense. But let's
So
talk
the
about Vertex.
yeah, so just on
Vertex.
the insurance in the lower categories of risk, in the open category, you're not, insurance isn't mandated; it's recommended.
Oh,
But once you
like
get into the
yeah,
higher category,
small like
yeah, small
recreation,
employee hobby, it's not required. But once you get
yeah.
above that, it is required. So yeah, so Vertex Aero, really another really exciting project. And I suppose the whole thing with Vertex Aero is that it's looking to the future and the future of drone training. And the way we see it, we've 3 partner companies involved in Vertex Aero, and we came together last November. It was announced at the Dubai Air Show, and we're looking towards the fact that any eVTOL aircraft that will come, when they're being launched, they're going to require to have pilots on board. Between the regulations and the public acceptance, they're
Right.
going to require pilots on board. And I suppose one of the factors to consider is when those pilots are on board is how are they going to be trained? Are there going to be hybrid pilots? Basically, they're going to be a crossover between fixed wing pilots and helicopter pilots. The requirements and the actual training that they're going to require is going to be a mix of both of those knowledge bases. So the other
Right.
thing is, again, we're back to flight simulators as well, because when they come out from their training, they'll have to do all of their theoretical knowledge, but it is also a single pilot operation, and they need to be able to step out of a flight simulator and get into the aircraft and go flying it, because none of the manufacturers at the moment are planning on building training aircraft which will have dual controls. So we're
Right.
looking at a pilot getting in and being capable of flying that aircraft immediately. So a lot of what we're doing with Vertex now is really looking towards being involved with a place like EUROCAE and EASA, and looking towards the guidance and building on the regulations to make sure that we've got a really positive regulatory structure. We have a notice of proposed amendment due out from EASA over the next, it was imminent, so I was hoping it would actually be out this week, which will allow for the type rating of eVTOL pilots. So it means that it would be a traditional commercial airplane or helicopter pilot can then layer an eVTOL type rating over that. And the next one then
Right.
that'll be out next year is going to be for ab initio training. But they come out as a notice of proposed amendment. You get an opportunity to comment on them, make your own inputs from as a commercial entity. You get to make your own inputs. Comments are all taken into account. Then it comes out as a draft regulation that's sent to the EU Commission, and then it's ratified. So we'd hope certainly by, I don't, towards the end of next year is probably ambitious, towards Q1, Q2 the following year, we'll have that type rating capability. And then shortly after that, we'll have ab initio, the capability of providing ab initio training to pilots.
And
So
ab
zero to
initio,
hero.
for those, that's a big Latin word, right? It's you don't already have a pilot license. You have
Yeah.
no specific
Yeah. So
experience, and you're
yeah.
doing this fresh, essentially,
Yeah.
from the start. So, all right, we're like maybe 2 minutes out. So, Julie, our time has flown, as I knew it would. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Like I said, I've been really wanting to get you on this podcast forever, and I'm so appreciative of Volatus Aerospace for endowing your appearance here today. So give us your like last 30 seconds, and I'm going to do a couple announcements before we close out. So go ahead.
Excellent.
So the
Well,
floor is yours.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to you, Dawn, as well, and to Volatus Aerospace for having me on. I really appreciate it and feel very privileged to be here talking with you. Look us up online. Avtrain.aero is the website. We're going to have FMCI is there, Future Mobility Ireland is online as well. Vertex Aero, we've an online presence too. So you can look up any of the 3 companies online. We're there, and keep in touch with us. Hook up on LinkedIn. I'm Julie Garland on LinkedIn. I'm wearing a red jacket on my photograph. So please come onto LinkedIn. And also, if anybody does want to do a license, just drop us an email as well. It's just julie@avtrain.aero, and you want to do it, or any questions about anything that's on our website or anything else, more than happy to engage with anybody. And is it James who is coming over to Ireland as well? Definitely we'll catch up when you come over to Ireland. So make sure that you tell us when you're going to be here.
Yeah, James has his own YouTube channel. He does a lot of reviews of different drones. That's why it's Before You Go. So I'm sure he'll have his at least camera on a stick, and I'm sure his drone.
Excellent.
And so my guess is we may see Julie featured on James's platforms as well. But that's kind of all she wrote for today, everybody. Thank you so much. Tomorrow on Clubhouse, Drone Law Connections, 1 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have our next Dawn of Drones podcast guest that's going to appear next week, this same time, same place, right here. Jason Christ. He is the CEO of a company called Class G Inc. And they're putting together a software that will facilitate toll roads in the sky. I know this is a very controversial topic in the United States. Who owns the air? Private parties, the FAA, do they control down to the lowest blade of grass? Do the states have a role? And so it's going to be a very lively discussion, I have no doubt. So please join us with Jason tomorrow on Clubhouse. And then again, same time, same place. And for those that haven't subscribed to fullcrew.io, check us out. Mike Peel, our producer here, and myself, we co-host that newscast every Monday, 9 a.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Eastern. Tons of fun. We're working with industry leaders to grab a couple of major things from the headlines and talk about them every week. And then also on Tuesdays, we have the Full Tilt, which is Tech Industry Leadership Talks, leadership podcast. But on that note, we are taking a Tilt crew break next week because of the 4th of July holiday here in the United States. But we will be live Wednesday with Jason on the Dawn of Drones and still doing our Clubhouse next week. So check us out. Thank you so much, Julie. That's all she wrote. We are out here.